I was sold for $50 million to a monster to replace my precious half-sister Chloe, who is too beautiful to waste on a cripple. My stepmother thinks she is discarding trash into a incinerator, but she does not know. She just handed me the key to the only thing I have ever wanted. I sat still in front of the vanity mirror, while the makeup artist applied the final layer of synthetic skin to my left cheek, creating a hideous burn scar that covered half my face. This was my mask. The world believes Elena Vance is a disfigured recluse who is afraid of her own shadow, and I have spent 5 years perfecting that lie. Monica, my stepmother, stood behind me, reflecting in the glass like a vulture waiting for a carcass. She gripped my shoulder with her manicured claws, digging into my flesh. You should be grateful, Elena. The Salvatore family did not ask for a beauty queen. They asked for a wife who is obedient and invisible. You are good at being invisible, aren't you? I lowered my head, feigning the tremble of a terrified girl. In my mind, I was calculating the exact pressure point on her neck that would stop her heart in 3 seconds. But not yet. The prize I need is locked inside Damon Salvatore's underground vault, and this marriage is my only way in. The wedding dress they forced me into was a size too small, making it difficult to breathe, but pain is something I mastered a long time ago. Monica leaned down to my ear and her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Do not forget your place. If you try to run away or if you reveal that you are not Chloe, I will stop paying for your grandmother's nursing home. You know what happens to old women with dementia when the money runs out? She smiled, a cruel satisfaction spreading across her face. I squeezed my hands together in my lap, acting the part of the helpless victim. I did not tell her that grandmother died 2 years ago. I did not tell her that the only reason I am here is because my intelligence network tracked the black USB containing my mother's murder evidence to the Salvatore estate. I am not a lamb walking to the slaughter. I am a Trojan horse. The chauffeur announced that the car was ready. I stood up, and the heavy silk of the gown rustled like dry leaves. Monica did not hug me. She simply checked her watch and waved her hand as if shooing away a fly. Get out of my sight. Make sure you do not disgust him too much before the contract is signed. The drive to the Salvatore estate took an hour, winding through the dense forests of upstate New York, where the cell service died and the fog rolled in like a suffocating blanket. The driver did not speak to me. The partition was up, separating the wealthy from the disposable. I used the reflection in the window to adjust the fake scar, ensuring the edges were seamless. It had to look repulsive enough to make Damon look away, but realistic enough to pass a casual inspection. Rumors in the underworld said Damon Salvatore was a cannibal who ate his previous 3 fiancées. Other rumors said he was a disfigured genius who ran the global information market from his wheelchair. As Viper, the top assassin on the dark web, I knew the truth was likely somewhere in the middle. The iron gates of the estate loomed ahead, towering 30 feet high, topped with spikes that looked sharp enough to pierce the sky. The car slowed down. 2 armed guards approached the vehicle. They were not wearing standard security uniforms. They wore tactical gear and carried military-grade assault rifles. I noted their trigger discipline and the way they scanned the perimeter. Professionals. This was not a home. This was a fortress. The car stopped in front of the main entrance, which looked more like a mausoleum than a mansion. The stone walls were dark gray and covered in ivy that looked like veins choking the life out of the building. The driver opened my door but did not offer a hand. I stepped out onto the gravel driveway, and the cold wind immediately bit through the thin lace of my dress. A woman was waiting for me at the top of the stairs. She was tall and severe, dressed in a black suit that cost more than my entire childhood home. Her gray hair was pulled back so tight it pulled the skin of her face taut. This must be Mrs. Graves, the head housekeeper. She looked down at me with eyes that were empty of any warmth. You are late. Her voice was like grinding stones. The master does not like to be kept waiting. I bowed my head slightly, playing the role of the submissive bride. I am sorry. The traffic was bad. She did not accept the apology. She simply turned on her heel and walked inside, expecting me to follow. I dragged the heavy train of my dress up the stairs, counting the steps. 12 steps. Limestone. Slippery when wet. A tactical disadvantage if I needed to make a quick exit. The interior of the mansion was freezing. It seemed that Damon Salvatore did not believe in heating, or perhaps the cold was intentional to keep guests uncomfortable. Mrs. Graves led me through a hallway lined with portraits of old men, who all looked like they enjoyed executing people for sport. We stopped in front of 2 massive oak doors. "He is in the library." She turned to me and her gaze lingered on my scar. A flicker of disgust passed through her eyes before she masked it with professional indifference. "Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not stare at his legs. And do not scream." The last instruction sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. What did she think was going to happen? She opened the doors and pushed me inside. The doors closed behind me with a heavy thud that sounded like the lid of a coffin sealing shut. The library was vast, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that required ladders to reach the top. The only light came from a fireplace at the far end where a fire was crackling violently. I stood by the door, clutching my purse, which contained nothing but a lipstick and a small cyanide pill hidden in the casing. A failsafe. I waited. The room was silent except for the popping of the firewood. My eyes scanned the shadows, adjusting to the dim light. I saw a desk the size of a small boat, cluttered with monitors. And then I heard it. The faint whir of a motor. A wheelchair emerged from the shadows near the window. Damon Salvatore. He was wearing a dark velvet smoking jacket that absorbed the light. His face was in profile, sharp and angular like it was cut from marble. He did not turn to look at me. "So this is the replacement." His voice was deep and smooth like rich chocolate laced with arsenic. He did not sound like a monster. He sounded like a king who was bored with his subjects. I took a hesitant step forward, forcing my knees to knock together. "My name is Elena. I am Chloe's sister." He finally turned the wheelchair to face me. The firelight caught his face, and for a second I forgot to breathe. He was devastatingly handsome. Dark hair falling over his forehead, eyes the color of ice that seemed to see right through my synthetic skin. He rolled closer, the wheels moving silently on the expensive Persian rug. He stopped 5 feet away from me. He looked at my dress, then up to my face. He studied the scar for a long time. His expression did not change. He did not flinch. He did not look away. Most people look away. "Step closer." It was a command, not a request. I stepped forward, my heart rate deliberately elevated to mimic fear. He reached out a hand. His fingers were long and elegant, the hands of a pianist or a strangler. He touched my chin, tilting my face up to the light. "The skin feels synthetic," he murmured. I froze. Had he figured it out already? My breath hitched in my throat. "It is a burn scar, sir. From a fire when I was a child." I lied, my voice trembling perfectly. He hummed a low sound of skepticism. He dropped his hand and wiped his fingers on a handkerchief as if I was dirty. "You are ugly." He stated it as a fact devoid of emotion. "But you are quiet." "I prefer ugly and quiet to beautiful and loud. Your sister screams too much." I wondered how he knew that Chloe screamed too much since they had never met. Or perhaps he had been watching us. "Turn around," he ordered. I turned slowly, feeling his gaze on my back. I could feel the heat of the fire and the coldness of his assessment. "You will sleep in the east wing." You are not to enter the West Wing, the basement, or my office. If you do, I will not divorce you. I will simply feed you to the dogs. Do you understand? I turned back to face him, nodding rapidly. Yes, sir. I understand. Good. Now pour me a drink. He gestured to a crystal decanter on a side table. I walked over my hands, shaking just enough to make the crystal clink against the glass. I poured the amber liquid and brought it to him. As I extended my hand, he suddenly grabbed my wrist. His grip was iron. He pulled me down so my face was inches from his. His eyes searched mine, looking for a crack in the facade. You are shaking, Elena. Are you afraid of me? I looked into his eyes and summoned the image of a terrified rabbit. Yes. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Good. Fear keeps you alive. He released my wrist and took the glass. He took a sip of the whiskey, his eyes never leaving me. I stepped back, putting distance between us. I needed to assess his physical condition. The wheelchair was a high-end model, customized with a joystick and what looked like a reinforced frame. His legs were covered by a blanket, but I could see the outline. They looked still. Atrophied, perhaps. But his upper body was powerful. The way he moved his wheelchair required significant core strength. He was not a weak cripple. He was a coiled snake. Suddenly, he placed the glass down on the table with a sharp clack. Catch. The word was spoken softly, but the action was a blur of motion. He snatched a silver fruit knife from the tray on his lap and threw it directly at my face. It was a reflex test. A normal person would scream and duck. An assassin would catch it or dodge with precision. I did neither. I stood absolutely still, my eyes widening in shock, allowing my body to lock up in paralyzed fear. The knife whizzed past my ear, cutting a single strand of my hair before burying itself in the heavy wooden door behind me with a dull thud. The vibration of the knife hitting the wood traveled through the floorboards. I let out a delayed gasp and collapsed to my knees, covering my head with my hands, trembling violently. It was a perfect performance of a panic attack. I hyperventilated, gasping for air, tears welling up in my eyes. Silence filled the room, heavy and oppressive. I waited for him to speak, to laugh, to mock me. I heard the motor of the wheelchair approach. He stopped right in front of me. I looked up through my tears. He was looking down at me with a strange expression. Disappointment. Or perhaps curiosity. Interesting, he said, softly reaching down to pull the loose strand of hair from my shoulder. Most of them faint. You just stood there. Perhaps you are not as useless as you look. He spun his wheelchair around and headed towards the door. Dinner is at 7. Do not be late. And Elena. He paused without looking back. Do not pull the knife out of the door. I like the way it looks. It reminds me that even the sharpest things can miss their target if they are underestimated. He left the room, leaving me alone with the fire and the knife that was still quivering in the wood. I slowly lowered my hands. The tears stopped instantly. My breathing returned to a slow, steady rhythm. I looked at the knife. He missed on purpose. He wanted to see if I would flinch. He suspects something. But he does not know that I am not the prey. I am the hunter. And I just got inside the cage. Dinner was a silent war of attrition, fought with silverware instead of guns. We sat at opposite ends of a mahogany table that was long enough to land a small aircraft on. The only sound in the cavernous dining room was the screech of Damon's knife scraping against the fine china. He was eating a steak that was so rare it looked like it might stand up and walk away. I pushed the peas around my plate with the enthusiasm of a prisoner on death row. Damon paused with a piece of meat halfway to his mouth. "You are not eating, Elena." He observed, his voice cutting through the silence like a razor wire. "My chef will be offended. And I do not like waste." I swallowed the lump of fear in my throat and forced a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "I am not very hungry, sir. My stomach is a bit upset." He chewed slowly, his eyes dissecting me. "Nervous. Good. A bride should be nervous on her wedding night, especially when she is married to a monster." He took a sip of red wine, his gaze darkening. "Finish your plate." "That is an order." I obeyed, forcing the cold food down my throat while he watched with predatory amusement. After dinner, he led me to the master bedroom on the second floor. The room was cold and smelled of antiseptic and expensive cologne. There was a king-size bed in the center, covered in black silk sheets that looked more like a shroud than bedding. Damon rolled his wheelchair to the side of the bed and turned to face me. "Close the door. And lock it." I did as I was told, the click of the lock sounding like a gunshot in the quiet room. He gestured with his chin towards me. "Come here." I walked towards him, stopping just out of arm's reach. He looked at my face, specifically at the synthetic scar that covered my left cheek. "Take it off." I blinked, feigning confusion. "Take what off, sir?" "The mask. The makeup. Whatever that hideous thing is on your face. I want to see the real damage." I hesitated, my hand going up to touch the fake burnt skin. "It is not a mask, sir. It is my face. Do not lie to me." He snapped. "I can smell the latex from here. Peel it off, or I will use my knife to carve it off." I slowly reached up and began to peel the edge of the synthetic skin near my jawline. It came away with a wet tearing sound, revealing the smooth, unblemished skin underneath. I had to be careful. I could not reveal my true face completely. Under the main scar layer, I had applied a second layer of makeup that simulated old, faded burn marks. Not as gruesome as the top layer, but enough to pass as a healed injury. I dropped the piece of latex into the trash can. Damon leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he inspected my cheek. He reached out and traced the line of the fake healed burn with his cold thumb. "Better," he whispered. "Still ugly. But at least it is honest." Suddenly his hand spasmed. His eyes rolled back in his head and his body went rigid. A strangled gasp escaped his lips. He clawed at his chest, his fingers curling into claws. The wheelchair tipped sideways. Damon crashed onto the floor with a heavy thud, his body seizing violently. I stood frozen for a split second, my mind racing. This was a test. Or a trap. Or he was actually dying. If he died, the vault would lock forever, and the USB would be destroyed. I dropped to my knees beside him. My instinct was to check his vitals with professional efficiency to stabilize his airway and administer an anti-epileptic. But Elena Vance, the scared, unwanted daughter, would not know how to do that. I had to be clumsy. I had to be useless. "Damon." I screamed, my voice shrill and panicked. "Oh God. Help. Somebody help." I grabbed his shoulders, shaking him uselessly. He continued to convulse, his head banging against the hardwood floor. I looked at the door. No one was coming. The soundproofing in this room was absolute. I looked back at him. His lips were turning blue. I had to do something. I loosened his tie, my fingers fumbling intentionally. I turned him onto his side to clear his airway, making sure to look terrified while doing it. "Please do not die." I sobbed, Do not die, you bastard. As I rolled him onto his side, my hand brushed against his legs. I needed to know. I let my hand slip down to his calf, pretending to adjust his legs to a safer position. I squeezed. Hard. The muscle underneath the expensive trousers was rock solid. Dense. Powerful. These were not the atrophied legs of a man who had been paralyzed for 5 years. These were the legs of a runner. A fighter. He was faking. The paralysis was a lie. The seizure was a lie. He was testing my medical knowledge and my reaction time. If I performed CPR perfectly, he would know I was trained. If I did nothing, he would know I was heartless. I had to escalate. I looked around wildly and spotted a silver letter opener on the nightstand. I grabbed it. I needed to shock him out of this fake seizure before he decided I was boring. I straddled his hips, pinning him down with my weight. I raised the letter opener high above my head, my hand shaking violently. I am going to save you. I yelled through my tears. I read this in a book. You have to stimulate the nerves with pain. It was a lie. A ridiculous made-up medical fact that a naive girl might believe. But it gave me an excuse to stab him. I aimed for his thigh. The same thigh that was supposedly paralyzed. If he was truly crippled, he would not feel it. If he was faking, he would have to stop me. I brought the blade down with lethal speed, aiming to bury it 2 inches into his quadriceps. Just as the tip of the blade pierced the fabric of his trousers, his hand shot up. He caught my wrist. His grip was like a steel trap, halting the knife millimeter from his skin. The convulsions stopped instantly. His breathing normalized in 1 second. He opened his eyes. They were clear, focused, and burning with a dark, icy intelligence. There was no trace of a seizure. He held my wrist in the air, the letter opener, hovering dangerously close to his leg. He looked at the weapon, then up at my face, which was still wet with fake tears. You read that in a book? He asked, his voice calm and steady, completely devoid of the distress he had shown seconds ago. I nodded, sniffing loudly, trying to pull my hand back, but he held fast. Yes. An old medical book. It said pain brings people back. He slowly sat up, using his core strength to lift his torso effortlessly, while still holding my wrist. He looked at his legs, then back at me. A smile curled the corner of his lips. It was a wolfish smile. You were aiming for the femoral artery, Elena. That is a very dangerous place to stimulate a nerve. You could have killed me. Or perhaps that was the plan. I widened my eyes in horror. No. I was just trying to help. He chuckled, a low, dark sound that vibrated against my chest. You are a terrible liar. But you have excellent aim. He twisted my wrist, forcing me to drop the letter opener. It clattered onto the floor. He pulled me closer, his face inches from mine. Let us see what else you are hiding underneath that ugly little mask of yours. I did not sleep that night. I lay on the floor at the foot of the bed, listening to the steady rhythm of Damon's breathing. He had not killed me, but he had stripped away my mask of innocence. He knew I was dangerous. He just did not know who I worked for. At 6 a.m, he rolled his wheelchair out of the room without saying a word. I waited 5 minutes before getting up. My mission had shifted. I needed access to the underground vault, and for that I needed his biometric data. Specifically, his right thumbprint. The sensors on the vault were military-grade thermal scanners, so a simple tape lift would not work. I needed a high-resolution 3D mold. I pulled a small tube of clear synthetic resin from the hollow heel of my shoe. It was undetectable to the naked eye, but when applied to a surface it captured ridges down to the micron. My target was his morning coffee cup. I walked into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I reapplied the ugly scar, making it look inflamed and painful. If I was going to play the victim, I had to look the part. The kitchen was a gleaming expanse of stainless steel and white marble that looked more like an operating theater than a place to cook food. Mrs. Graves was already there, barking orders at two terrified maids. When I entered, the chatter stopped instantly. Mrs. Graves turned slowly, her eyes raking over my silk pajamas with disdain. You are up. I expected you to sleep in. Or run away. I walked towards the coffee machine, keeping my head lowered. I wanted to make coffee for my husband. Mrs. Graves let out a sharp bark of laughter. Your husband? Do not flatter yourself. You are a placeholder until he finds a way to break the contract. She stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the espresso machine. Her perfume was overpowering, a cloying scent of dead flowers. She picked up a kettle of boiling water from the stove. The steam rose in hot, angry clouds. I stepped back, sensing the violence radiating from her. You are in my way. Mrs. Graves said coldly. She tipped the kettle. It was not an accident. It was a calculated move to assert dominance. The scalding water splashed onto my bare arm. The pain was immediate and searing. My skin turned red instantly. A normal girl would have screamed. I let out a whimpering gasp and clutched my arm, dropping to the floor. Oh God. It burns. Mrs. Graves looked down at me with a satisfied sneer. She did not apologize. She simply set the kettle down. You should be more careful. You are clumsy, just like your mother. She turned her back to me to pour herself a cup of her special herbal tea. While she was distracted enjoying her small victory, I made my move. I reached into the hem of my sleeve where I had concealed a microscopic capsule of concentrated purgative. It was a chemical compound I developed myself. Colorless. Odorless. And effective within 15 minutes. I stood up, still clutching my burned arm and sobbing softly. I am sorry, Mrs. Graves. I just wanted to help. I reached for a rag to wipe the floor, moving close to her teacup which sat on the counter. With a sleight of hand that would make a magician jealous, I crushed the capsule and dusted the powder into her steaming cup. It dissolved instantly. I stepped back, bowing my head. Please forgive me. Mrs. Graves huffed and picked up her tea, taking a long, smug sip. Get out of my kitchen. Go serve the master his coffee. If you spill it, I will ensure the next burn is on your face. I grabbed a fresh cup of black coffee, applied a thin layer of my resin to the handle, and hurried out. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the fireworks. Damon was in the sunroom reading the Wall Street Journal on a tablet. He did not look up when I entered. I placed the coffee on the small table beside him, making sure the handle was positioned for his right hand. Good morning, I whispered. He turned the page. You are limping, and you smell like burnt skin. Did Mrs. Graves bite you? He asked without looking at me. She had an accident with the kettle, sir. It was my fault. I stood in his way. Damon finally looked up. His eyes landed on the angry red blister on my forearm. He took the coffee cup, gripping the handle firmly. His thumb pressed perfectly into the invisible resin. I held my breath. He took a sip and set it down. Excellent. I had the print. But the show was just beginning. Mrs. Graves marched into the room holding a clipboard. Sir, we need to discuss the menu for the charity gala next week. She stood tall and imposing, glaring at me to leave. Damon ignored her and pointed to the chair opposite him. "Sit down, Elena." Mrs. Graves, twitching with irritation, stood by his side. "Sir, this is a private staff meeting." "She is not staff," Damon said calmly. "She is the mistress of this house." Mrs. Graves turned a shade of purple that clashed with her uniform. Suddenly, a look of confusion crossed her face. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. A bead of sweat appeared on her upper lip. The chemical was hitting her faster than I anticipated. Her stomach let out a loud, undeniable gurgle that echoed in the quiet room. Damon raised an eyebrow. "Are you quite finished, Mrs. Graves?" She clutched her clipboard to her stomach, her face draining of color. Excuse me, sir. I think I ate something." She tried to back away, but her legs betrayed her. The muscles in her abdomen seized. She doubled over, letting out a groan of pure agony. It happened in slow motion. Mrs. Graves lost control. The sound was wet and humiliating. A dark stain spread rapidly across the back of her pristine gray skirt. The smell hit us a second later. It was horrific. Mrs. Graves gasped, her eyes wide with shame and horror. She looked at Damon, then at me. I covered my mouth with my hand, widening my eyes in fake shock. "Oh my God." "Mrs. Graves, are you ill?" Damon did not look disgusted. He looked bored. He placed his tablet down and steepled his fingers. He looked at the puddle forming on the expensive Italian marble floor. "Mrs. Graves," he said, his voice smooth and deadly. "I tolerate incompetence. I tolerate theft. But I do not tolerate filth. You have exactly 5 minutes to pack your bags and vacate my property." Mrs. Graves began to sob uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face as she tried to waddle towards the door, slipping in her own mess. It was a pathetic sight. A woman who had terrorized this household for 20 years, reduced to a crying toddler. When she was gone, silence returned to the sunroom. I stood up and moved to take the coffee cup. I should clean this up. Damon reached out and grabbed my wrist, stopping me. "Leave it. The cleaning crew will handle the biohazard." He looked at my burned arm, then at the door where Mrs. Graves had fled. He pulled me closer until I was leaning over his wheelchair. He sniffed the air near my hand, not the smell of the accident, but the faint chemical scent of the resin on the cup. "You are very resourceful, Elena," he murmured. "Mrs. Graves has an iron stomach. She eats raw eggs for breakfast. Whatever you slipped her was military grade." I tried to pull away, feigning innocence. "I do not know what you mean, sir." She said she felt sick. Damon released my wrist and picked up the coffee cup. He ran his thumb over the handle, feeling the slight texture of the resin. He knew. He absolutely knew. He looked at me, his eyes dancing with a dark, dangerous delight. "You took my fingerprint. And you neutralized my watchdog. All before breakfast." He took a sip of the coffee, his gaze never leaving mine. "I think I am going to enjoy being married to you. Keep the print. Consider it a wedding gift. But if you try to open the vault while I am awake, I will break your fingers. One by one. Now get out of my sight. I have a company to run." I took the cup, my heart pounding in my chest, not from fear, but from the thrill of the game. I had the key, and I had a partner who was just as twisted as I was. The peace of the morning was shattered by the arrival of a white limousine that looked too long for the driveway and too tacky for the neighborhood. My stepmother Monica and my half-sister Chloe had arrived. They did not knock. They swept into the grand foyer like they owned the deed to the property. I was standing by the stairs polishing a vase, a prop I used to appear busy and subservient. Monica was wearing a fur coat that probably cost more than my mother's life insurance payout. Chloe was dressed in white silk, looking like a pure angel who had just descended from heaven to judge the poor. They stopped when they saw me. Monica curled her lip in disgust. "Look at you, Elena. You look like the help." "I suppose that is fitting." I lowered my head, clutching the polishing rag. "Hello, Mother." "Hello, Chloe," I whispered. Chloe ignored me completely. Her eyes were scanning the room, looking for the gold mine. "Where is he? Where is the monster?" Damon rolled into the foyer from the library. He was wearing a dark charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. Even in a wheelchair, he radiated a dominance that made the air in the room feel heavier. He stopped 10 feet away from them, his face a mask of bored indifference. Monica stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the marble. "Damon, darling. We came to see how poor Elena was adjusting, and to discuss the allowance you promised for her care." Damon did not look at Monica. His eyes were fixed on Chloe. Chloe was staring at him with her mouth slightly open. She had expected a beast. Instead, she saw a man with the face of a fallen angel and the wealth of a small country. I saw the regret flash in her eyes. She was thinking that she could have been the one living in this palace. She pushed past her mother and walked towards him, swaying her hips in a way that was desperate and obvious. "Hello, Damon. I am Chloe. The one you were supposed to marry?" She purred, her voice dropping an octave. "My sister is a bit plain, isn't she? I hope she hasn't bored you to death yet." Damon looked her up and down. His expression was unreadable. "You are wearing white," he observed. "It is a bold choice for a muddy season." Chloe giggled, a sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. "Oh, I never get dirty. I have people for that." She turned to me, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Speaking of people, Elena, come here. My shoe has a smudge on it. Clean it." It was a power move. A classic humiliation tactic to show Damon that I was beneath her and she was the alpha. I hesitated for a second, glancing at Damon. He did not move. He did not speak. He just watched, waiting to see what I would do. I walked over to Chloe and knelt on the cold floor. I took the rag and reached for her expensive Italian heel. This was part of the act. The submissive, battered wife. But inside I was imagining slipping the rag around her ankle and twisting until the ligaments snapped. Chloe looked down at me with triumph. "See, Damon. She knows her place. She is natural at being on her knees." I wiped the imaginary dirt from her shoe. "Good girl." Chloe patted my head like I was a dog. "Now get me a drink. Something expensive." I stood up, keeping my eyes lowered. "Yes, Chloe." As I turned to leave, Damon spoke. His voice was soft, but it carried across the room like a crack of thunder. "Stay there, Elena." Damon rolled his wheelchair forward until he was inches away from Chloe. He was holding a glass of red wine. A vintage Chateau Margaux, 1995. He looked at the wine, swirling it gently in the glass. Then he looked at Chloe's pristine white dress. "Do you know the difference between this wine and you?" he asked politely. Chloe blinked, confused by the question but eager for his attention. "No." "What is it?" The wine has value. Damon flicked his wrist. The dark red liquid splashed across the front of her white silk dress. It looked like a gunshot wound blooming on her chest. Chloe shrieked, jumping back and clawing at the stain. My dress. You ruined my dress. This is limited edition. Damon placed the empty glass on a side table. That dress cost $5,000. The wine cost $10,000. You are now the cheapest thing in this room. He turned to Monica, who was standing there with her mouth agape. Get your daughter and get out. If I see either of you on my property again, I will release the hounds. And I do not feed them on Tuesdays. Monica tried to bluster. You cannot treat us like this. We are family. Damon snapped his fingers. 2 armed guards stepped out from the shadows. Escort the trash to the curb. If they resist, call the police and charge them with trespassing and solicitation. As the guards dragged a screaming Chloe and a cursing Monica out the front door, the silence returned to the foyer. I stood there, clutching the dirty rag, watching them go. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not gratitude. It was respect. Damon Salvatore was a predator who protected his territory. He turned his wheelchair to face me. I did not do that for you, Elena. I did it because I hate noise. And they were very noisy. He rolled closer until our knees were touching. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a tablet. He handed it to me. The screen showed a photo of a man. Middle-aged. Balding. Dangerous eyes. This is Marcus Kane. My biggest competitor in the data market. Damon whispered, his voice low and conspiratorial. He is hosting a charity gala tonight. The same one we are attending. I defended you from the wolves outside, Elena. Now I need you to be the wolf for me. I looked at the photo, memorizing the face. What do you want me to do? Kill him. I asked, keeping my face blank. Damon smirked. Too messy. I want his server codes. He keeps them on a biometrically locked drive in his pocket. You are going to steal it. And you are going to do it while pushing my wheelchair and playing the role of my pathetic, devoted wife. Can you handle that? Or should I call your sister back? I looked at him, and for the first time, I let a genuine cold smile touch my lips. Leave the sister out of this. I will get you the codes. But the price is 1 hour in your vault. Unsupervised. Damon laughed, a dark sound of approval. Get the codes first. Then we will negotiate your fee. Go get dressed, Mrs. Salvatore. We have a party to crash. The charity gala was held in a ballroom that was large enough to house a small army and expensive enough to feed a third-world country. I pushed Damon's wheelchair through the sea of tuxedos and designer gowns, feeling the weight of 100 judgmental eyes on us. To them, we were a sideshow attraction. The crippled billionaire and his disfigured charity case of a wife. I kept my head down, playing the role of the shy, battered woman perfectly, while my eyes scanned the perimeter. Security was tight but sloppy. Too many guards focused on the entrances and not enough watching the floor. This was not just a party. It was a hunting ground. Damon sat in his chair like a king on a throne, indifferent to the whispers. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than the car we arrived in, and his lap was covered by a black cashmere blanket. He was unarmed. At least that is what the metal detectors said. I knew better. His cufflinks were sharpened titanium, and I suspected the frame of his wheelchair contained enough plastic explosives to level the building. Marcus Kane, the host of the evening, spotted us immediately. He was a short man with a Napoleon complex and a smile that looked like it was bought from a discount dentist. He walked towards us, his entourage parting like the Red Sea. Damon Salvatore. He boomed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. I did not think you would make it. Rumor had it your health was declining. Damon stopped the wheelchair with a touch of his joystick. Marcus. I see you are still alive. Disappointing. Kane laughed, a loud fake sound that made my skin crawl. He stepped closer, invading Damon's personal space. He patted Damon on the shoulder, a gesture of disrespect disguised as camaraderie. And this must be the new wife. He looked at me, his eyes lingering on my fake scar with theatrical pity. A bit damaged, isn't she? But I suppose beggars cannot be choosers when one is confined to a chair. I saw the drive. It was a small silver rectangle protruding slightly from the breast pocket of Kane's jacket. Biometric lock. Titanium casing. That was the target. I lowered my head, trembling slightly. It is an honor to meet you, Mr. Kane. I whispered. Kane sneered and turned back to Damon. Enjoy the party, Damon. Try not to run over anyone with your little toy car. He turned to walk away, exposing his left side. The target was moving away. I tightened my grip on the handles of the wheelchair. Suddenly, the air pressure in the room changed. It was a subtle shift, something only a trained assassin would notice. The hum of the ventilation system cut out. A waiter near the kitchen door reached into his jacket not for a notepad but for a weapon. It was a hit. A coordinated strike. And we were in the kill zone. The lights died. Total darkness swallowed the room instantly. The music cut off, replaced by the collective gasp of 300 people. Then the screaming started. In the chaos, I let go of the wheelchair. I did not need to see. I had memorized the layout of the room and the position of every threat in the last 3 seconds before the blackout. I moved. To the left, the waiter with the gun. I intercepted him. My hand found his wrist. Snap. The sound of breaking bone was lost in the screams of the crowd. He dropped the gun. I drove my palm into his throat, crushing his windpipe. He fell silently. 2 more attackers were closing in on Damon's position. I could hear their heavy boots on the marble floor. I slid across the polished surface like a shadow. I swept the legs of the first man, sending him crashing into a table of champagne flutes. The crash was deafening. The second man was closer to Damon. I sensed him raising a knife. I launched myself off a pillar, using the momentum to deliver a spinning kick to his temple. My heel connected with a sickening thud. He collapsed instantly. I was now standing next to Marcus Kane, who was freezing in panic near the center of the chaos. He was shouting for his bodyguards. I brushed past him. My hand dipped into his breast pocket. My fingers closed around the cold metal of the drive. It took less than 1 second. I slid the drive into my bodice and dove back towards the wheelchair. I grabbed the handles and crouched down, resuming my position as the terrified wife just as the emergency generators kicked in. The lights flickered back on, bathing the room in a harsh white glare. The scene was a masterpiece of confusion. 3 men in waiter uniforms lay unconscious on the floor around us, surrounded by shattered glass and spilled champagne. One was clutching his broken wrist. Another was out cold. The third was gasping for air. The guests were pressed against the walls, screaming. I was huddled behind Damon's wheelchair, shaking violently, my face buried in my hands. Oh God. I sobbed. What happened? Damon sat perfectly still. He was not looking at the attackers. He was looking at the reflection in a silver platter on the table in front of us. He had seen the movement, or felt the air displacement. Marcus Kane was frantically patting his chest, checking for his wallet and phone. He found them. He sighed in relief. He did not check his breast pocket. He did not know he had just lost his empire. Security swarmed the room, securing the area. The police were called. It was a mess. Damon turned his wheelchair around facing me. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "Are you hurt, Elena?" He asked loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. I shook my head, wiping fake tears from my eyes. No. I was so scared. I just closed my eyes and prayed. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His fingers brushed against my neck, checking my pulse. It was steady. Too steady for a woman who had just been in the middle of a firefight. "You pray very effectively," he whispered so only I could hear. 3 men down in 10 seconds. In heels. I am impressed. We left the party before the police could take statements. The car ride home was silent. The partition was up. As soon as we were on the highway, I reached into my dress and pulled out the silver drive. I held it out to him. Payment delivered. Damon took the drive, turning it over in his hands. He looked at it, then at me. His expression shifted from amusement to something darker. Respect. And suspicion. "You moved faster than the dark, Elena. Marcus Kane did not even feel the wind of your hand. Who exactly trained you?" Because that was not self-defense class at the YMCA. I leaned back against the leather seat, smoothing my dress. My father taught me to be invisible. And the world taught me to be fast. Now about my hour in the vault. "You promised." Damon pocketed the drive. "I did. But first we need to deal with the fact that my wife is a lethal weapon. And I suspect you are going to be very expensive to keep." The elevator descended into the bowels of the earth, moving with a smooth, silent velocity that made my ears pop. We were not going to the wine cellar. We were dropping 50 feet below the foundation of the Salvatore estate into the nerve center of Damon's empire. The air grew colder with every passing second, smelling of ozone and recycled oxygen. I watched the numbers on the digital display count down. -3. -4. -5. Beside me, Damon sat in his wheelchair, motionless. He did not look at me. He was staring straight ahead, his reflection in the steel doors, revealing a man who was calculating his next 10 moves. The doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss that sounded like a heavy breath. Before us lay a long corridor lined with server racks blinking with thousands of blue and green lights. The hum of the cooling fans was a low vibration that I could feel in the soles of my shoes. This was not just a vault. It was a fortress of information. The place where secrets went to be buried or sold to the highest bidder. Damon rolled his wheelchair to the main security console at the end of the hall. The interface was military-grade polished black glass with no visible buttons. He placed his right hand on the scanner. A green laser swept over his palm, reading the unique topography of his skin. Then he leaned forward. A red beam shot out from the panel, scanning his retina. Identity confirmed. The mechanical voice echoed in the empty space, cold and synthetic. Access granted, level Omega. A heavy circular steel door, the kind used in nuclear bunkers, groaned and began to rotate. The gears turned with the sound of grinding metal echoing loudly in the silence. As the door swung open, revealing the treasure trove inside, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. The prize was within reach. I walked past Damon, my heels clicking sharply on the metal grating of the floor. I knew exactly where to look. My intelligence gathering had pinpointed the location of physical evidence storage to Sector 4. I moved past rows of shelves stacked with gold bars and bundles of cash wrapped in plastic. There were diamonds the size of golf balls and paintings that had been stolen from museums decades ago. I did not care about the money. Wealth was just a tool, but information was power. I stopped in front of a wall of safety deposit boxes. My eyes scanned the numbers until I found it. Box 714. My mother's birthday. The box was simple brushed steel with a biometric lock. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the resin mold of Damon's fingerprint that I had harvested from the coffee cup. My hand trembled slightly. This was the moment I had bled for. I placed the resin mold onto the scanner. The light turned green. The lock clicked. I pulled the drawer open. Inside, resting on a velvet cushion, sat a single black USB drive. The logo of the Phoenix Group, the organization that killed my mother, was etched into the casing. I reached for it. Do not touch it. Damon's voice came from behind me, sharp and commanding, cutting through the hum of the servers. Unless you want your hand to be incinerated. I froze my fingers inches from the drive. I looked closer. A thin, almost invisible laser grid surrounded the object inside the drawer. It was a secondary trigger. A dead man's switch. I turned around slowly. Damon was watching me with a smirk playing on his lips. His eyes were dancing with dark amusement. You really thought it would be that easy, Elena? You thought a little bit of fingerprint resin was enough to outsmart me. That drive is linked to my heartbeat monitor. If I die, it fries. If unauthorized skin touches the field, it fries. You need me. I stood up straight, letting the disappointment wash over me, then disappear. I assessed the situation. I could disable the laser grid, but it would take 10 minutes and a frequency jammer, which I did not have. I had a negotiation to win. I walked back towards him, stopping just outside his personal space. I looked at him squarely in the eyes, dropping the act of the submissive wife. I fulfilled my part of the deal, Damon. I got you the cane codes. I saved your life at the gala. Open the grid. Damon chuckled, a low sound that lacked any warmth. You are demanding things. I like that. But I do not make deals with strangers. And I do not know who you are. I know you are not the scared little girl with the burn scar. That mask is getting boring. So before I open anything, you are going to show me exactly who I married. Take it off. All of it. The fake scar. The fake fear. I want to see the face of the woman who broke 3 men's bones in under 10 seconds. He crossed his arms, waiting. It was an ultimatum. The lock was not just the laser. It was the truth. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a packet of industrial makeup removing wipes. I tore the packet open, the sharp scent of alcohol filling the air between us. I brought the cloth to my face. I scrubbed my left cheek. The synthetic skin dissolved, turning into a gray sludge on the white cloth. I wiped away the layers of latex and pigment. I wiped away the tragedy that I had worn like a shield for 5 years. The burn mark disappeared. The rough texture vanished. When I was finished, I dropped the dirty wipe on the floor. I lifted my chin, revealing my true face to him for the first time. The skin was smooth, unblemished, and porcelain white. My features were sharp, symmetrical, and cold. I was not the ugly duckling. I was the swan that had been bred for war. Damon stared at me. His eyes traced the line of my jaw, then moved to my lips. He did not look shocked. He looked validated. Much better. He murmured, his voice dropping an octave. You are far too beautiful to be a simple wife, Elena. You are a weapon. And I have a war to win. He gripped the arms of his wheelchair. Then he did something that made my breath hitch. He pushed himself up. He rose to his full height, towering over me, casting a long shadow across the server racks. He stood on his own 2 feet, steady and powerful. The cripple act was over in this room. He walked towards me, his steps heavy and deliberate. He stopped inches from me, looking down into my eyes. "Here is the deal," he said softly. "You want that USB. I want Marcus Kane's empire dismantled. You have the skills to decrypt his drive and the lethal ability to remove the obstacles in my way. Become my sword. Clear the board for me, and I will give you the key to your mother's past. We are not husband and wife anymore." He continued, his hand reaching out to tilt my chin up. "We are partners in crime. Do you accept?" I looked at the USB drive sitting behind the laser grid, then back at the man who was just as dangerous as I was. I realized then that the trap had changed. I was not just trapped in a marriage. I was trapped in a game of power with a grandmaster. I extended my hand. "Deal." Damon took my hand. His grip was warm and crushing. A bond of blood and secrets. He leaned down, his lips brushing against my ear. "Be careful, Mrs. Salvatore. By showing me your face, you just put a target on your back. The whole underworld is going to come for us now. And I hope you are ready to kill them all." The morning sun filtered through the bulletproof glass of the living room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I sat on the white sofa, wearing a silk robe, my face bare and beautiful, no longer hiding behind the mask of the ugly duckling. Damon sat opposite me, not in his wheelchair but in a leather armchair, his legs crossed casually. We were discussing the encryption on the Kane drive like 2 CEOs discussing a merger, not 2 killers planning a takedown. The intercom buzzed, interrupting the silence. "Mrs. Graves was gone, replaced by a temporary staff that Damon had not yet vetted thoroughly. A maid entered carrying a silver tray. "Sir, your stepmother is at the gate. She says she has brought your lawyer, Mr. Sterling, to discuss the estate settlement." Damon looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "I do not have a lawyer named Sterling." I checked my internal database. The name was generic. The cover was weak. "Let them in," Damon ordered. "I want to see what desperate game Monica is playing today." Monica swept into the room wearing a black dress as if she was already mourning a funeral. But my eyes were not on her. They were fixed on the man walking 2 steps behind her. He was tall, wearing a bespoke navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He looked like a standard Wall Street shark, but his walk gave him away. He moved on the balls of his feet. Silent. Balanced. Ready to strike. He stopped and adjusted his cufflinks. On the inside of his left wrist, I saw a flash of ink. A small black scorpion. The Syndicate. My blood ran cold. This was not a lawyer. This was an executioner. And he was here for me. Monica smiled, a jagged, predatory grin. "Elena, dear. You look different. Did you get plastic surgery with Damon's money already? Mr. Sterling here is going to help us renegotiate your value." Mr. Sterling placed the briefcase on the table. He did not look at Damon. He looked directly at me, his eyes dead and shark-like. "Viper. It has been a long time. The organization does not appreciate assets who go rogue. We have a termination order." I tensed my muscles, preparing to lunge. But before I could move, the maid poured tea for Damon. He picked up the cup, his eyes locked on Sterling. "Who let you in here?" Damon asked, his voice calm but dangerous. Sterling smiled. "We have friends everywhere, Mr. Salvatore. Even in your kitchen." Damon brought the cup to his lips. "Don't," I whispered. But it was too late. He took a sip. 1 second passed. 2 seconds. Then the cup slipped from his fingers, crashing onto the floor. Damon gripped his throat, his face turning a terrifying shade of gray. He convulsed once and slumped forward onto the floor, blood frothing at his mouth. Dark black blood. Neurotoxin. Class A. Paralysis in 30 seconds. Death in 10 minutes without an antidote. I recognized the symptoms instantly. The maid who had poured the tea pulled a suppressed pistol from her apron. Sterling opened his briefcase, revealing a submachine gun. Monica laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Oh my God. He is dying. Quick, sign the papers, Damon. Leave everything to me." She was too stupid to realize she was just a pawn. Sterling shot the maid in the head. She fell without a sound. "No loose ends," Sterling said calmly, stepping over her body. He pointed the gun at me. "Secure the target. The perimeter is breached. We have 20 men outside. You have nowhere to run, Viper. Surrender, and we will make it quick." I looked at Damon. He was gasping for air, his eyes wide and bloodshot, staring at me. He was paralyzed but conscious. He was dying. If he died, the sensors in the vault would flatline. The USB containing the evidence of my mother's murder would be incinerated instantly. The prize was slipping away. Sterling checked his watch. "You have 5 seconds to decide. Come with us or die with him." I looked at the back exit. It was unlocked. I could sprint through the kitchen, reach the garage, steal a car, and vanish. I had the skills to disappear. I could survive. But I would lose the only thing that mattered. I looked at Damon again. He was not begging. He was angry. Even in death, he was furious. The cost of exit was too high. I made my choice. I did not raise my hands in surrender. I did not run. I moved with the speed that earned me my code name. I kicked the heavy oak coffee table, flipping it onto its side to create a temporary barricade between me and Sterling. Bullets chewed into the wood, sending splinters flying. I dove behind the sofa, dragging Damon's heavy body with me. He was dead weight. I slapped his face hard. "Stay with me. Do not die yet, or I will kill you myself." I reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. I accessed the smart home security system. Lockdown mode. Override code Alpha Omega. The steel shutters on the windows slammed down with a deafening clang, plunging the room into semi-darkness. The magnetic locks on the front and back doors engaged, sealing us inside. Sterling's voice echoed from the other side of the room. "You just locked yourself in a tomb, Viper. We will cut through the doors in 5 minutes." I checked Damon's pulse. It was erratic. I needed to slow his heart rate to delay the poison circulation. I ripped the silk sash from my robe and tied it tight around his arm, acting as a tourniquet, though it was mostly psychological. Then I reached under the sofa cushion. Damon was a paranoid man. He kept weapons everywhere. My hand closed around the cold grip of a desert eagle. 7 rounds. I checked the chamber. Loaded. I turned to look at the terrified Monica, who was cowering in the corner, realizing too late that she was trapped in a war zone. I looked at the heavy steel door where Sterling and his team were setting up breaching charges. I stood up, staying low. My fear was gone, replaced by a cold, mechanical rage. I looked down at Damon. His eyes followed me. I leaned down and whispered, "You promised me a key, Damon. I am going to hold you to that." Do not dare stop breathing. I turned to face the door, raising the gun. They thought they had trapped a rat. They were wrong. They had locked themselves in with the viper. I screamed at the door, my voice echoing off the walls. You want me, Sterling? Come and get me. But bring body bags. You are going to need them. I fired a single warning shot into the ceiling, blowing out the chandelier. Glass rained down on us like diamonds. The siege had begun. And I was the one holding the castle. The heavy steel-reinforced doors of the living room groaned under the pressure of the thermal charges. I knew we had less than 30 seconds before they breached. I grabbed Damon by the collar of his shirt and dragged him across the polished floor, leaving a trail of scuff marks on the marble. He was heavy, a dead weight of muscle and bone, but I did not stop. I hauled him behind the massive onyx wet bar at the far end of the room. It was bulletproof solid stone and offered the only cover in this open killing field. I propped him up against the cabinets. His face was pale, his breathing shallow and rattling. The neurotoxin was shutting down his respiratory system. I reached into his pocket and pulled out his smartphone. I jammed it into his hand, forcing his fingers to grip it. I know you can hear me, Damon. I slapped his cheek hard, leaving a red mark. Wake up. I do not need your legs. I need your brain. Access the house grid. Kill the lights. Be my eyes. The explosion tore the doors off their hinges, sending a cloud of dust and debris sweeping into the room. 4 men in tactical gear stormed in, moving with the precision of a SWAT team. They swept the room with laser sights, the red dots dancing across the furniture like angry fireflies. I crouched behind the bar, checking the magazine of the Desert Eagle. 3 rounds left. I needed more than bullets. I needed an edge. Suddenly, the phone in Damon's hand lit up. His thumb moved. It was a microscopic twitch, a monumental effort of will against the poison. He swiped the screen. The room plunged into absolute darkness. The emergency shutters sealed the windows, creating a pitch-black void. The assassins paused their night vision goggles, whining as they adjusted. But I did not need night vision. I had memorized the room. I moved. I vaulted over the bar, landing silently on my bare feet. I was a ghost in the machine. I flanked the first man who was scanning the area near the fireplace. I came up behind him. I did not shoot. Gunshots give away position. I used the butt of the heavy pistol. I swung it in a savage arc, connecting with the base of his skull. The sound was a dull, wet thud. He collapsed instantly. I grabbed his earpiece and ripped it out, shoving it into my own ear. I heard Sterling's voice crackling on the line. Team 1 report. Target is in the north corner. Flank her. He was watching on the thermal cameras. Damon had not hacked the external feeds yet. I needed a distraction. I looked at the corner where Monica was curled up in a ball, sobbing into her expensive fur coat. A cruel plan formed in my mind. She wanted to be part of the family. Now was her chance. I sprinted to the corner, staying low. I grabbed Monica by her hair and pulled her up. She tried to scream, but I clamped my hand over her mouth. Listen to me. I whispered into her ear, my voice cold and hard. You are going to run to the center of the room and scream for help. If you do not, I will throw you to them myself. I shoved her forward. She stumbled into the open, weeping and waving her hands. Don't shoot. It is me. Help me. The remaining 3 assassins turned towards the noise, their weapons raised. They saw a figure moving. They fired. A hail of bullets chewed into the floor around Monica. She screamed, dropping to the floor and crawling like a worm. The muzzle flashes gave away their positions. One near the sofa. Two by the door. I did not hesitate. I raised the Desert Eagle and fired. 2 shots. 2 bodies hit the floor. The third man realized the trap and spun around. But the house suddenly came alive. The stereo system blasted heavy metal music at maximum volume, a wall of sound that was disorienting and painful. The strobe lights in the ceiling began to flash violently, blinding anyone without protective gear. Damon. He was in the system. He was turning the house into a weapon. The assassin covered his ears, stumbling back. I closed the distance and swept his legs. He fell. I finished it with a swift kick to the temple. Silence returned as the music cut off abruptly. 4 down. But Sterling was still out there. And he was not a grunt. He was a predator. I ran back to the bar to check on Damon. He was worse. His skin was gray and his eyes were rolling back. The phone had slipped from his hand. I checked his pulse. It was faint, a fluttering bird trapped in a cage. He was dying. I frantically searched his pockets for anything, an antidote, a stimulant, anything. My fingers brushed against a hard case in his inner pocket. An emergency medical kit. I tore it open. Inside was a single syringe of adrenaline. It was meant for cardiac arrest, but it would have to do. I did not have time to find a vein. I stabbed the needle straight into his chest, right through the expensive fabric of his shirt, and depressed the plunger. "Come back to me," I hissed. A shadow fell over us. I looked up. Sterling was standing on top of the bar, looking down at us like a god of death. He was holding a suppressed pistol aimed directly at my forehead. He had moved silently, bypassing the chaos. "You put up a good fight, Viper," he said, his voice calm and professional. "But the house always wins." He cocked the hammer. I raised my empty gun, knowing it was useless. I braced myself for the end. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. It was loud, deafening in the small space. But it did not come from Sterling. Sterling's eyes went wide. A red bloom appeared on his chest. He looked down in confusion, then toppled forward, crashing onto the floor next to me. I turned to look at Damon. He was sitting up, his back against the cabinets. His hand was shaking violently, but it was holding a small silver revolver that he had pulled from an ankle holster. Smoke curled from the barrel. His chest was heaving, the adrenaline forcing his heart to beat against the poison. He looked at me, his eyes burning with a feverish intensity. "I told you." He rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "No one touches my things." He dropped the gun and slumped back, his energy spent. I scrambled over to him, pressing my hands against his chest. We were surrounded by bodies, the house was destroyed, and the police sirens were wailing in the distance. But we were alive. The contract was still valid. The room was bathed in the strobe effect of red and blue lights, as the tactical team swarmed the destroyed living room. I threw the heavy Desert Eagle under the sofa and collapsed onto Damon's chest, letting the tears flow freely. This was the encore. The grand finale of my performance as the terrified wife. "Officer, please help him." I screamed, my voice cracking perfectly. "My stepmother. She brought these men here. She wanted his inheritance." I pointed a trembling finger at Monica, who was cowering in the corner, still clutching her fur coat. The police commander, a gruff man with a mustache, signaled his men. "Secure the woman. Get the paramedics for Mr. Firmis. Salvatore." Monica looked up, her eyes wide with confusion and horror. "What?" "No. That is a lie. She is the killer. She is the one with the gun. Look at her. Two officers grabbed Monica by the arms, hauling her up roughly. She kicked and screamed, but her protests were drowned out by the chaos. No one believed the hysterical woman who had brought a hit squad into a billionaire's home. The narrative was simple, and I had woven it perfectly. The greedy stepmother hired mercenaries to kill the crippled husband and the innocent stepdaughter to seize the estate. The dead bodies of the assassins were proof enough of the intent. I held Damon's hand as the paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher. His skin was cold and clammy, but the pulse was there. Faint, but stubborn. Just like him. I looked at Monica as they dragged her past me towards the door. "Wait," I said softly to the officer. "Please let me speak to her. I need to ask her why." The officer nodded sympathetically and loosened his grip slightly, allowing me to step into Monica's personal space. I leaned in close, my face wet with tears, my expression one of heartbreak for the cameras and the cops. But for Monica, I let the mask slip. Just for a second. My eyes turned cold and dead, the eyes of the viper. "You sold me for $50 million, Monica." I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sirens. "You thought you were discarding trash. But you were feeding a wolf. Enjoy prison. I hear the showers are very cold in the winter." Monica gasped, her face draining of all color as the realization hit her. She opened her mouth to scream to tell them who I really was, but I stepped back, sobbing into my hands. "Take her away, please." I cannot look at her. The officers dragged her out, screaming into the night. Her life was over. Mine was just beginning. 3 days later, I sat in a private room at Mount Sinai Hospital. The room smelled of antiseptic and lilies, the latter sent by business partners who were already circling like vultures, hoping for a vacancy at the top of Salvatore Industries. Damon lay in the bed, hooked up to more machines than a space shuttle. The doctors said the neurotoxin had caused temporary respiratory failure, but his heart was strong. Too strong to stop beating. I sat in the chair by the window, watching the New York skyline. In my lap, I held the black USB drive. I had retrieved it from the vault before the police arrived. But it was useless without the decryption key. And the key was in the mind of the man sleeping in the bed. I heard a shift in breathing. The steady rhythm of the ventilator changed. I turned. Damon's eyes were open. They were not groggy or confused. They were clear, sharp, and instantly alert. He looked at the ceiling, then at the tubes in his arm, and finally at me. "You are still here." He rasped, his voice rough from disuse. "I expected you to be halfway to Mexico with the silverware." I stood up and walked to the bedside. I poured a glass of water and held the straw to his lips. He took a sip, watching me over the rim of the glass. "I considered it," I said calmly. "But I forgot the access code to your offshore accounts. And I hate flying coach." Damon smirked, a weak but genuine expression. "You stayed." "Because of the contract." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the black USB drive. I placed it on the tray table between us. The plastic clicked against the metal surface. "I stayed for this. The prize. You promised me the key, Damon. I saved your life. I saved your house. And I disposed of the trash that was my stepmother. Now fulfill your end of the deal." Damon looked at the drive. He slowly raised his hand, the IV tubes rattling. He tapped a sequence of rhythms on the side of the bed frame. It was a Morse code sequence. I memorized it instantly. Alpha. 7. Tango. Zulu. Break. Phoenix. Down. He looked at me. "That is the password. But the decryption requires a biometric scan." My retina. He gestured for me to bring the laptop that was sitting on the console. I opened it and plugged in the drive. I held the screen up to his face. The camera scanned his eye. A green bar loaded across the screen. Access granted. The files opened. Hundreds of documents. Photos. Videos. Evidence of the Phoenix Group's illegal arms dealing and the order for my mother's execution signed by Marcus Kane. It was all there. The smoking gun I had spent 5 years hunting. I felt a lump in my throat. I finally had it. I closed the laptop and clutched it to my chest. Thank you. I turned to leave. My mission was complete. The contract was fulfilled. Where are you going? Damon asked, his voice stopping me at the door. I turned back. To finish it. To kill Marcus Kane. And then I disappear. That was the plan. Damon shook his head slowly. That is a waste. A waste of talent. And a waste of a good partnership. He pushed the button to raise the head of his bed, sitting up straighter. You are a solitary hunter, Elena. But even tigers hunt better in pairs when the prey is large enough. Marcus Kane is just one head of the Hydra. You take him down, 3 more will rise. The syndicate will never stop hunting you. And my enemies will never stop coming for me. He extended his hand towards me. The hand that had held a gun to save my life. We destroyed a hit squad in my living room without speaking a word. We think alike. We kill alike. And quite frankly, I have grown fond of having a wife who can catch a knife with her teeth. Stay. Not as a subordinate. Not as a fake wife. But as a partner. We run the empire together. We burn the world down together. And we rebuild it in our image. Mr. and Mrs. Salvatore. The kings and queens of the underworld. I looked at his hand. Then I looked at the door leading to freedom. Freedom was lonely. Freedom was running. What Damon offered was power. Absolute, untouchable power. And perhaps something else. Something twisted and dark that only another monster could understand. I walked back to the bed. I did not take his hand. I placed my own hand over his, covering it completely. I leaned down until my lips were inches from his. My contract has a high renewal fee, Damon. Half the company, and full access to the vault. Damon smiled, the predator recognizing its mate. Done. Now help me out of this bed. We have a rival to execute. And I believe you owe me a dance.